Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to deploy Argo CD in Kubernetes cluster. In my previous video, we saw this overview. We went through the normal workflow, like you define your application, you store your application manifest in Github repository, and you deploy Argo CD in a Kubernetes cluster and let Argo CD manage your applications. So you create a new app in Argo CD that's going to get synced with what you've got in your Github repository. You deploy Argo CD in a Kubernetes cluster. So in this video, we're going to first deploy Argo CD in a Kubernetes cluster. I've already got a Kubernetes cluster. And then we're going to be using Argo CD Web UI to deploy an application for which I've got the manifest stored in a Github repository. Let's get started. So I've got my Kubernetes cluster, kubectl get nodes, one master and two worker nodes running version 1.18.6. Let me show you my Github repository. GitHub and the application manifest that I'm storing in the GitHub repository. So Argo CD demo. So that's the project. It's a very simple project, very simple repository. All I've got is just a README file. In YAML's directory, I've got two manifests, one for the deployment, so nginx deployment. So nothing fancy here. It's just a normal nginx deployment with one replica. And then I've got a service. I'm exposing the nginx application as a service of type node port, and I'm deploying this in the default namespace. So all I've got is just two manifest file, one for the deployment, one for the service, and it's in the YAML's directory in the root of my GitHub repository, Argo CD demo. Okay, so that's my GitHub repository where I've defined the application that I want to deploy using Argo CD. That's looking good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to deploy Argo CD in our Kubernetes cluster. So let me search Argo CD in GitHub, Argo CD, and the latest release as of recording this video is 1.6.2. And if I go in there, there's a quick start. So the first command is kubectl create namespace Argo CD. So all our Argo CD related components will be deployed in this namespace Argo CD. And again, this command to deploy all the required resources. Okay, so if I do that, you can see here there's a lot of resources that gets deployed. So a couple of custom resource definitions, a couple of service accounts, roles, cluster role, role binding, cluster role binding, config maps, servers, and deployment. So the deployment, you can see here the components that gets deployed when you deploy your Argo CD in your Kubernetes clusters. Argo CD server, so that's this component here, Argo CD server, the main API server. So all the interactions to your Argo CD happens through this Argo CD server. It's like the Kube API server for your Kubernetes. So all the interaction has to go through this Argo CD server. And we've got the repo server, which is here. And that's responsible to sync your repository from GitHub or Bitbucket to the local repository maintained by Argo CD. And we've got the application controller here. So that is responsible for maintaining the state of the application. It periodically checks the local repository and then see if the infrastructure, if the service is defined, if the service is running in your Kubernetes cluster matches the definition that you have defined in your GitHub repository. If there's any deviation, you'll see that it is out of sync. So that's managed by the application controller component that's here. And you've got Redis for memory caching. And you've also got Dex server. I forgot to mention about the Dex server in my previous video. So Dex is like a gateway for your Argo CD web application. So you can connect Dex server with external identity provider. Like if you've got Active Directory, OpenLDAP, or any other identity provider, you can hook it up with Argo CD through this Dex server component. All right, so we've got everything. Let's see how things are looking. kubectl -n Argo CD get all. Okay, so all of our components are running fine. And if you look in here, all the servers used by Argo CD are exposed as type cluster IP. So now I'm gonna log into the Argo CD web UI. And the service responsible for the web UI is the Argo CD server. But it's exposed as type cluster IP, so you wouldn't be able to access it from outside of the cluster. So we need to change this cluster type, the service type to load balancer or node port, or if you want, you can use ingress and expose it. In my case, I'm going to use node port. I'm going to change the service to type node port. So kubectl -n Argo CD edit service Argo CD server. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and change the type of the service from cluster IP to node port and save that. And now if I do get all, and you can see here the service Argo CD is now node port service, and we've got this node port 31786 and 32192. So now we can open up our browser and browse to one of our worker nodes and then go to this particular node port. You can either go to 31786 on port 80 or 32192 on port 443. Even if you go to this port, it will get redirected to the HTTPS site. Okay, let's try that. So for that, I need to know the IP address of my worker nodes, -o wide. Okay, so I'm going to pick one of those. Let me pick this IP address. So that's the IP address of one of my worker node. Let me paste that and go to either this port or this port. Let's check this port. It should automatically forward you to the HTTPS site. Okay, 31786. There we go. It's a warning about using a self-signing certificate, self-signed certificate. That's okay. Accept the risk and continue. Okay, so that's our Argo CD login page. The default username is admin. And the default password is auto-generated, and the password is the name of the Argo CD server pod. So that's Argo CD server service, and the corresponding pod is Argo CD server pod. So the name of that pod without that pod in the front, so it's Argo CD. Copy that and paste it here. Sign in. Okay, so there we go. So we've now logged into the Argo CD web UI as the admin user. And let's go through the web UI. On the left here, the navigation sidebar, you've got your applications. There is this manage your repositories. The first thing is we need to add the repository, and you can also add your cluster. If I click on this cluster, so that's the cluster where we've deployed our Argo CD, right? So it's this cluster here where we deployed our Argo CD. And you can add additional clusters so that the Argo CD can deploy your application onto other clusters as well. But you don't see any option here to create a new cluster because you won't be able to create new clusters. Sorry, you won't be able to add additional clusters through this web UI. So you need to use the Argo CD command line tool to add new cluster, which we will see in a later video. All right, so that's cluster. By default, this cluster is added. So when you deploy your application, you can always choose this cluster. And if I go back to the settings, repositories, so you can add your repository here. Projects, there's one default project. If you want, you can add a new project. And user info, I'm logged in as admin user, and that's some docs here. Okay, so I'm gonna add my repository here. Connect repo using HTTPS. Type is get repository URL to my repository that I've got here. Okay, yeah, that's the URL to my Argo CD demo repository. Okay, so we've got that. Username and password is optional because that's my public repository. If you want, you can use that. And I think that's all I need. Connect. Okay, connection is successful. We've configured a repository, and now if I go back here, or I can actually create an application from here. So select the repository and click on these three dots here, and you will be able to create an application from this page. Or you can always go back to the manage your application, create an application. Okay, let's create our application. Application name, give it some name. Let's call it Argo CD demo project. We only have one project default, so select that project. Sync policy, we can either manually sync or we can enable automatic sync. So I want to show you the automatic sync way later in this video. So for now, I'm going to select manual. Okay, source is going to be Git, and we've already added a repository here. So let's select that. And it's loading path in the repository. So that's our repository, and in the repository our manifests are stored in the YAMLs directory. So the path is YAMLs. Destination cluster is our in cluster, the one cluster. But if you've added more clusters through Argo CD CLI, you would see all of them listed here. You would be able to select which cluster you want to deploy your app to. Namespace, let's select the default namespace. Directory recurs. So if you've got multiple sub-level directories, subdirectories under, for example, under YAMLs directory, if you've got other subdirectories which contain other manifest files, you can select this option. So if you select this option, all the manifest in all the subdirectories will be included in this application. I don't have any subdirectories, so I'm just going to leave that blank. So creating the application now. So when we create the application, you can see here it immediately goes into out of sync state. Okay, so you can see the view here. So that's the grid view, that's the list view. Okay, so I'm selecting this application. At the moment it says out of sync, because what we need is, you can look at the app diff on the top here. It doesn't say much, so that's the state of the application that we want. That's the one that we've defined in our GitHub repository. So this is what it currently looks like, because we don't have anything deployed. And if I go to my cluster here and do kubectl get all, I don't see anything. So because we've set the sync policy to manual, whatever change we apply, we need to do it manually. We can't do it. There's no automatic sync enabled, so we have to do it manually for the first time. Okay, so that's the tree view. That's the list view. Okay, let's sync it. And it also shows you the latest commit of the GitHub repository that we are using for this project, for this app. Okay, so let's do the sync first. Okay, so you can selectively sync the resource. So this app contains two resources. One is the deployment, the other one is the service. Do you want to deploy, do you want to sync all the services, or just selectively sync just the deployment or just the service? I'm going to select everything. You can also do a dry run to see what it will look like. I'm going to do a synchronize. So once I do the synchronize, you can see here the deployment is getting created, the pods are actually running, and the service has its endpoint here. And now the cluster, the app status is synced and it's healthy. Sync status, you can look at the sync status to see when it was last synced. So started at the last sync duration, how long it took, and finished at, and the revision. That's the revision of your GitHub repository. Okay, so we've now deployed the application through the Argo CD. So Argo CD deployed the application for us. So now if I go to the command prompt and do kubectl get all, and you can see here our nginx pod is running. That's our service, and we have our service exposed as node port. And I can actually verify if my nginx application is working fine. Let's do kubectl get nodes and look at one of the node here and go to that particular node port 31960. Okay, 31960. Cool. So that's our nginx welcome page. Our nginx application has been deployed through Argo CD, and it has taken care of the deployment for us. So now Argo CD manages, and everything is in sync with what we have defined in our GitHub repository. So now if you try to make any changes to this application manually, state of the app will go out of sync immediately. So let's try and do something. Okay, so I'm going to kubectl get all. I'm going to scale the deployment by 2. So now it's running one pod. I'm gonna kubectl scale deploy nginx -- replicas 2. So kubectl get all. You can see here, so now there are 2 pods here, but definitely what we have defined in our GitHub repository is just 1 pod, but we've changed the state of the app manually by adding extra 1 pod. All right, so now you can see here we've got 2 pods running, and the status of our app is out of sync. That's because you can look at, so what's out of sync? So service is in sync. You can see that it's healthy and it's in sync. So the green heart is healthy. So our deployment has a green heart, which means our deployment is healthy, but it's not in sync with what we have got in our GitHub repository. So that's something wrong. So you can't find from here what's actually wrong. So you can look at the app diff here, and so the right side here is what we expect to have in our cluster, and the left side here is what is actually in the cluster right now. So what we want is number of replicas to be 1, but we've got replicas to 2. So now if I do the sync again, it's going to terminate that one again. So now you can see here it's terminating, and back in the console, if I do kubectl get all, it's getting terminated. So Argo CD is trying to sync our app to what we've got in our GitHub repository, what we've actually defined in our GitHub repository. Okay, so now everything is back and everything is in sync. If you want to enable auto sync in your app, and you can do that. So if I go to the app details here and scroll down, sync policy is none. I'm going to enable auto sync. So whenever I'm going to enable that. So whenever the state of my app deviates from what I have defined in my GitHub repository, Argo CD will enable autosync. So autosync is if we make any change in our GitHub repository, it will immediately apply the changes to our app running in our cluster. And I'm also going to enable prune resources. If there are any additional resources, is it okay for the Argo CD to delete the extra resources? Yes, I'm going to enable that. Self-healing, if anything goes out of hand, out of control, then Argo CD will try to heal the application by restarting the pods or so on. Okay, so I'm going to enable that one as well. So everything is enabled. Let me try and bring up another pod manually. Okay, so I'm going to do the same exercise now. kubectl scale deploy nginx -- replicas 2, but this time I'm not going to manually sync it. I haven't pressed enter now. So all we've got is a healthy app and everything is in sync. And if I scale it by 2, and you can see here it has got 2, but it's immediately terminating that one because we've enabled autosync, we've enabled self-healing, we've also enabled pruning the resources. So now whatever changes you do in your cluster manually, whatever changes you do to this app manually, it will get reverted and it will try to match what you've got in your GitHub repository. So what if we want to update this app? So let me go to my GitHub repository. Let's say I want to update this app. So temporarily I'm going to turn off the automatic syncing. Let's do that just to show you what it looks like when you do an update in your GitHub repository. So disable autosync. Okay, so autosync is disabled. So now I'm going to go to my GitHub repository. I'm going to edit nginx deployment, edit, and I'm going to change the number of replicas from 1 to 3. And let's commit the changes. Okay, so that's done. So back in here, if I do refresh, it's refreshing, and you can see here it has gone out of sync. So let's look at what's the difference. If you go into the app diff, it says in the GitHub repository, what we've got is replicas should be 3, but what we've got is just one instance of nginx running. And you can do sync now and then synchronize. So it's going to launch another 2 nginx containers for you. And you can also verify that here, kubectl get all, and we've got 3 nginx pod running. So now what if I enable auto sync and I don't have to change anything? I don't have to keep syncing it manually whenever it goes out of sync. So let's enable auto sync again and then change our GitHub repository file in the GitHub repository. Okay, prune resource enable. We need to also set the prune resources to enable, otherwise it won't delete the extra containers it has started. Self-healing enable. Got everything enabled. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the nginx.yaml again in my GitHub repository, and immediately you will see that Argo CD would have updated the live app in my cluster to match that of what I've changed in my GitHub repository. Okay, so nginx.yaml, let me edit this again and set the number of replicas back to 1. And let me commit the changes here. And if I go back here, so you can wait here or you can just click refresh and it will change the number of pods to 1. See, it has terminated the 2 pods and now it's back to 1 pod. Right, and if I look in here, kubectl get all, you can see we are back to 1 pod because we've updated our GitHub repository. We've updated the manifest in our GitHub repository, and Argo CD has changed the live application as well. History and rollback. If you want to roll back to a previous version, you can do that. History and rollback. So these are the different versions that we've deployed from the GitHub. And if I want to go, for example, to this one here, I can select that one and click on rollback. Okay, so that's the previous version of the file that I had in my GitHub. So previously I had replicas as 3, so this time we've got 3 instances of nginx running, but you can see here it's out of sync, right? Because again, if you go to app sync, we have to have replicas 1, so that's the latest head version of our GitHub repository, but now we've got replicas as 3 because we've rolled back. And if I do sync again, synchronize, it should terminate. Yeah, it is terminating all the containers. Sorry, the 2 containers. So now it's in sync. Okay, so that's how it actually works. and I can also delete the app from here. Okay, and everything is going away and there's no app now. And here, if I do kubectl get all, yep, everything is gone. So that's how you use Argo CD web UI to deploy your app, and that's the normal workflow. So hope you found this useful. Please give this a try. Thanks for your time watching this video. Hope you found this useful. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.